The stepfather, comes home and discovers crumbs on the ground and gets very upset with the child, and about 2 in the morning forces the child to get up and start doing push-ups in this residence. In total, throughout this torture ordeal, this child was forced to do over 700 push-ups.
And that was just a portion of this alleged torture of a 12-year-old boy at the hands of his stepfather, James Jennings. The questions obviously still abound. Where was the mom? Why such extreme measures? Did the stepdad somehow believe he was engaged in good parenting practices? Actually, he did offer an explanation. Check this out.
While the father was upset, he was beating on a chair and several screws fell off of the chair onto the ground, and the stepfather forced this 12-year-old child to eat the screws. During this torture ordeal, the stepfather continued to beat this 12-year-old with the stepfather's belt, punched him in the legs and the face several times, also bloodying his nose.
Because he let the dog run free in the house and left crumbs on the floor. Tonight we're going to try to understand what this is all about, what the consequences might be for the mother and father, the mother and stepdad. Joining me, Michael Pearl, author of To Train Up a Child, former L.A. County Prosecutor Lonnie Combs, and Sergeant Mike Hundelt, is that correct, of the St. Clair County Sheriff's Office. Sergeant, I want to go to you first. Now, you guys have seen lots of crime, I'm sure, but this one must have been terribly disturbing for you, and I'm just wondering how it affected your entire community there.
Well, it was very, very difficult, and not only the community, but the investigators that worked on the case, they described it as one of the worst ones that they've seen also too, and it was very difficult for everybody who worked it.
And my understanding is the mom was arrested too, the mother. Now, allegedly she was out of town during the torture. What is it she's being held for?
She was charged with endangering the life of a child, which is a Class A misdemeanor. She was arrested whenever she was out of town. From our understanding, she was in Florida. We believe on some type of military leave down there. And when she returned, they brought her up to our department, and she was arrested there and charged with. The state's attorney's office charged her with endangering the life of a child. Her bond was set at $20,000, and she did post bond and was released from jail.
Michael, I want to go out to you. You've been advocating, certain kinds of child-rearing practices, and I actually did a program where you took out your rod and hit me on the hand. Do you have that rod with you by any chance? No?
No, I don't. Since you're not here, I left it at home.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Michael. But I wonder what your take is on this.
I go to prisons every week. I've spent about 1,800 hours dealing with men, many of them who have abused their children like that. And I'm looking forward to meeting Jennings in prison. I'll be able to teach him the Bible, I hope, for 10 to 15 years.
But Michael, my question to you is how do we get people to differentiate? I mean, you're advocating a kind of you're more aggressive than I believe somebody should be, but how do you prevent somebody from going from where you advocate to this kind of guy?
Well, I teach what 95% of all parents practice, which is just traditional child training with the possibility of corporal chastisement, but this was not a parent. In fact, he was not even a parent. He was a stepfather, and if you'll notice, most of these cases of abuse do take place where there's not that natural parental nurturing, where it's a stepfather who gets angry. This man's a criminal. This man, if what we read is true, this man is totally out of control, and it was not about training the child. It was not about loving the child. It was not about nurturing him to do what he ought to do. This was just a man that was angry. He was a big bully, and he picked on a small child, and if what we read is true, he should go to jail for it.
Michael, and again, people would criticize Michael for some of his techniques, and yet even Michael's looking at this guy going, come on. And Michael, I'm glad to hear you say, talking about not using children or contemplating that children are in any way objects or not being able to appreciate what children feel. And speaking of which, my hand still hurts when you whacked me with that stick, by the way, but be that as it may, just be easy with that thing. Lonnie, I want to go to you. Last week we talked about a grandmother who ran her granddaughter to death. She's being set up for the death penalty. What should the punishment be for this guy and this mom too?
Well, I have to say I don't agree with pretty much anything else Mr. Pearl says about child rearing, but I do agree that this father or stepfather should get prison time. You know, I prosecuted a lot of murderers, and you know they would get the death penalty, but I would get these child cases where people would do these horrible things to children. And I'll tell you, some of those cases need the death penalty, because how can these people victimize poor, innocent, vulnerable children who are just looking for love, attention, kindness from this parent figure, and they are done such horrible things. This is clearly torture. There's no other way to describe what this man did.
So Lonnie, again, everyone on my panel here, I'm really in sort of enthusiastic about what's being said here tonight. How do I talk about child abuse all the time? I've been dealing with it for 20 years, really probably 30 years now. How do we get people to understand what this is and the profound impact it has in the development of kids? I mean, if we wanted to do away with crime in this country and misery and many different mental health issues, proper handling of children would go most of the way there.
That's right, and it starts with the kids.
But how do we get people to understand it? You deal with it in the courtroom, I deal with it in the hospitals. Why can't people seem to get this?
Well, I'll tell you, right now there seems to be this proliferation of parents and grandparents who seem to be out of control with their children. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now, the recession, economic problems, and people are taking it out on their kids, the vulnerable victims there. We have to start with the basic line that Mr. Pearl seems to feel is not appropriate, and that is, don't hit your children. Don't perpetuate violence in the home. These are your precious people that you are entrusted to raise up and take care of. Let's not start with violence in the home. Let's start with respect.
Michael, go ahead and respond to that.
That's right. I mean, she's absolutely right. People who hit their children are out of control, and there needs to be some intervention taking place.
But Michael, do you think that this is a question I was asking you earlier, do you think your techniques in any way encourage people that do behave the way Lonnie's describing?
I represent 300 million Americans in their view. I represent traditional child training, which leaves open the option to use corporal chastisement in the process of nurturing and training our children. And
Mr. Pearl, you can say all the
would...
numbers you want. It doesn't change the fact that what you're talking about, whether you call it spanking or hitting, you're using a violent act towards
Lonnie,
your child.
I'm going to stop you and ask